I'm just going to get started so that we, stay on time. Thank you, Laura. As I said, this is the General Operating Support 2026-27 Grant Recipient Workshop. I'm going to start with our land acknowledgement. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that the land that we stand on and the place that we call Cuyahoga County is land that was claimed by the United States government through force, displacement, and treaties negotiated in bad faith. We acknowledge those of the Shawnee, Miami, Erie, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Haudenosaunee Confederacy, whose lands we stand on, and the thousands of Native Americans representing over 100 tribes who currently live in Northeast Ohio today. We thank the Lake Erie Native American Council for helping us to develop this acknowledgement. We also want to take a moment to lift up CAC's value of equity. We lead with racial equity in our work because the creation and perpetuation of racial inequalities is embedded into government and grant making. We confront the white supremacy that resides in our work because racial inequities across all indicators of success are deep and pervasive. We also recognize the power and potential that organizations who produce arts and cultural programming have as bearers of culture. These institutions have the power to write the narrative about who belongs and who is valued. We encourage arts organizations to connect with resources to advance equity in your own work, and you can visit cacgrants.org/equity or contact our grant team to learn more. Our goal today is to launch the 2026 General Operating Support Grant and set you, our grantees, up for a successful grant year. We'll briefly introduce CAC and the General Operating Support Grant for grantees whose grant amounts max out at either $5,000 or $20,000. Organizations whose grant amounts exceed $20,000 should attend our next General Operating Support Workshop tomorrow, Wednesday, January 21st at 1 p.m. In the chat, we'll place the registration link for you soon. Next, we'll talk through the reporting calendar and grant year requirements. And finally, we'll hold time for folks to ask questions or to rectify any issues that they are experiencing. If you have questions about the content of the presentation, please feel free to raise your hand or drop them in the chat so we can address them when they come up. So first, we'll share a little bit about Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. Cuyahoga Arts and Culture is the public funder for arts and culture organizations in Cuyahoga County and has invested more than $270 million in more than 500 organizations since 2007. Cuyahoga County residents created Cuyahoga Arts and Culture in 2006 when they approved a tax on cigarettes to support arts and culture in our community. The tax was expanded in 2024 and now runs through 2035. Our mission is to inspire and strengthen the community by investing in arts and culture. And to do that, we make grants to 501c3 arts and culture organizations and projects in Cuyahoga County. In 2026, CAC is investing almost $12.9 million through grants to a record-breaking 300 organizations who bring arts and culture to life in our community. And now I will hand it over to Devon to introduce the grant team.
Thank you, Maya. So CAC has a board of 5 individuals appointed by the county executive and a staff of 7. So on this slide, you can see the grant making team, and in particular, myself, Maya and Eric are the grant managers. We each have a portfolio of about 100 organizations that we work with through the grant cycles, and one of us is each of your grant managers. If you're not sure who your grant manager is, we have a PDF that lists that out. You can access that through the guidelines on our web pages or any follow-up notifications that we give you. Your grant manager is here to help, and we can help you find materials that you need, like old applications or reports, offer guidance around completing requirements, and we will surely be sending you reminders throughout the year to help make your connections with the organizations. And then we're also here with Laura, our wonderful communications manager as well. So the goal of the General Operating Support Grant is to strengthen the community by deepening its access to arts and culture through meaningful multi-year core support to arts and cultural organizations based here in Cuyahoga County. The vast majority of CAC funds goes towards general operating support. In 2026, that's roughly 11.4 out of our 12.9 core making budget. There are 81 grantees who are receiving grants between $5,000 to $20,000 in their general operating support. So the funding criteria are characteristics that all general operating support grantees are expected to demonstrate. CAC's three funding criteria across all grant programs are one, public benefit, which is an organization's ability to meaningfully connect with its community to achieve its missions. Next is artistic and cultural vibrancy, an organization's ability to create relevant and engaging work that furthers its mission. And then lastly, we have organizational capacity, an organization's ability to successfully plan for and manage its resources. Grantees who went through the application process this year are likely familiar with these, but if you're a returning grantee, they might not be at the front of mind. So I recommend giving a full criteria definitions a close read as we start the grant year. They can be found on page 8 of your guidelines, which we'll share in the link later. Regardless of whether or not you had to apply this year, all GOS grantees are expected to show evidence of the funding criteria through reporting, which we'll get to shortly. A couple of examples from past and grantees that it demonstrated these practices include for public benefit, some focused on diversifying and expanding their audiences, for artistic and cultural vibrancy, some focused on enhancing their programming, building collaborative partnerships throughout the community. And then for organizational capacity, some focused on developing their board and creating systems to improve their workplace for their staff. We do have more examples listed in the General Operating Support Guidelines glossary. However, there are many organizations with very different goals, and we do not limit or have expectations to fall within the examples listed. Instead, they're kind of shared for more of an inspiration for topics to reflect on if you're having trouble expressing your organization's alignment with the criteria. So I want to get into the concept of belonging. The concept of belonging intersects our funding criteria and is a value that CAC holds close, in particular around public benefit, and the first and most emphasized of our funding criteria. We define this and several other important terms in our glossary, which is linked in the guidelines, and we'll be sure to share it after this workshop. Belonging is an unwavering commitment to not simply tolerating and respecting difference, but to ensure that all people are welcome and feel that they belong in a given space. This graphic, which comes from the John A. Powell and the Othering and Belonging Institute, is a great illustration of that. Belonging is not just about inviting people into the circle, but expanding it, bringing more chairs in. It's about bridging differences, not removing differences, requiring people to change to fit in. It's about co-creating and co-owning. In organizations and institutions, this concept should be present at all levels, not just in education or outreach departments, but especially in leadership where power is held. Belonging in practice will look different at every organization, but it will not include tokenizing people of color, extractive partnerships with smaller organizations, or outreach programs into communities where you have no trust relationships being built. I found that the materials from the Othering and Belonging Institute to be super practical, understanding, and very helpful in our work. And we can share a link with that as well with our follow-up materials. So now I want to talk about the reporting requirements for 2026. In simplest terms, January 31st is one of your most important dates to mark on your calendar. This is the due date for your goals form, a report in which you'll align your organization's goals with the year with CAC's funding criteria. To receive your first payment, which is 60% of your grant, you will have to complete the following three things. You must have completed all of your 2025 reporting requirements. No matter if you're a returning GOS grantee or coming from another program, you must complete all previous reporting requirements to be in good standing for your new 2026 grant cycle. You must have signed and submitted your 2026 grant agreement. If you are still having problems or questions regarding this, please stick around after the workshop so we can rectify this. And lastly, you have to have completed and submitted your goals form by the deadline to receive the full payment. Late submissions are subject to delayed payments and potentially grant reductions. So we'll share a link to the goals form instructions and a follow-up email after the workshop for those who might not have seen it yet. And it'll be a breakdown of all of your requirements. But the next thing I want you to keep in mind is your Cleveland Art Events postings. We will get into more detail about that in a bit, but for now, the main thing you should remember is that there is no set date for all grantees to follow. Your postings will be relevant to your organization's programming. Some folks will have one big event, some will have seasonal, or some will have year-long programming. At the end of the year, all grantees will be given instructions for their final reports, which will be due January 31st of 2027, along with your 2027 goals report. So that's correct. These two requirements will overlap and will be sure to provide ample reminders and information regarding such. This essentially will restart the cycle for 2027. So the things mentioned here for your goals will apply again at the same time. But for folks who are eager and you want to get to planning, I'll share a couple of notes about what to expect for your final reports. Your final reports, follow-ups or updates to your goals will be what's expected in your final report. We'll also be asking for some financial data regarding your data arts cultural profile and your 2025 990s. You'll provide proof of programming and proof of crediting to CAC, which we'll get to in a bit. For those previously a part of the General Operating Support Program, you might have noticed a difference in how payments are expected to be dispersed during this cycle. For those who are joining from Project Support, you will see that we will automatically issue you the first 60% of your grant upon the submission and approval of your goals form. So that's essentially like what you guys remember was the option for the advance payment request. That is now just built into your grant if you're coming from Project Support. If you are a returning GOS grantee and things seem different, and the way that things are put out might go or derail your plans, you can reach out to any of us to discuss options and we'll work with you accordingly. Again, we will all reach out with the information for your report instructions before the final report to ensure that you know exactly what you need to submit or collect for your grants. Before I move on to Laura for speaking with crediting requirements, I wanted to see if I should pause here to check for any questions that folks might have, because that was quite a bit. All right, it looks like we are good to go. So I'll pass it over to Laura. If you have any questions, put them in the chat and we'll get to them as soon as we can.
Thanks, Devon. So all CAC grantees are required to acknowledge CAC funding in their publicly funded arts and culture programming. By sharing with audiences that your organization is funded by the residents of Cuyahoga County through CAC, you're showing what public funding for the arts can do in real time. Your publicity for your grant is an important advocacy tool to help champion public funding. You can do this in many ways, in your programs or website, via pre-show announcements, in your marketing emails, or on venue or exhibit signage. Our communications toolkit can be found on our website and is linked at the end of this presentation. Here you can find CAC's logo, our suite of ads and social media graphics, and a number of other tools to help fulfill this requirement. Another requirement is to post your events on clevelandartsevents.com. Every month, thousands of individuals visit this online arts events calendar looking for arts and culture activities in Cuyahoga County. By posting your events on this community calendar, you are not only meeting the terms of your grant agreement, but you are demonstrating public benefit and connecting with county residents. All GOS grantees are required to post an event on clevelandartsevents.com in each month of 2026 that you have public programming. So if you hold classes, programs, or events throughout the year, there should be at least 12 events on the site by the end of the year. Be sure to get your event listed at least 30 days ahead of your program so that it has enough time for residents to see it. Our newsletter reaches about 10,000 subscribers twice a month, so definitely take advantage of that included promotion. All grantee organizations have profiles created already on the site. If you have any issues accessing your account or need assistance with crediting materials, we are happy to help. We have a handout we'll share specifically on how to meet these 2 requirements linked with this PowerPoint. And now I will hand it over to Eric.
Thanks, Laura. The requirement or report that I'd like to take a moment to talk about is the 2026 Organizational Goals Form. This might be on your current to-do list, and again, it's due by January 31st and is required for all general operating support grantees. The goals you share in this first requirement will be referenced in the remainder of your reporting for the grant year. With such a diverse cohort of grantees, we ask organizations to define success for themselves through your self-defined goals. Here are some tips for completing this form. So first, your goals should connect to the funding criteria. With most organizations not being required to reapply each year, this is your opportunity to show that your organization's mission-driven work is relevant to CAC's funding criteria and worthy of public funding. You'll set a goal for public benefit, artistic and cultural vibrancy, and organizational capacity. We also ask grantees to be mindful of their racial equity goals. We've required racial equity goals for the last several years to show how your organization is working toward racial equity. However, this year, the racial equity goal is completely optional. Secondly, we encourage you to submit goals that are drawn from your organization's strategic plan or other organization-wide planning framework. Of course, we ask that you submit goals that your organization anticipates working on this year so that you will be able to report back on your progress. The idea here is that you shouldn't be making new CAC-specific work or goals, but rather showing how the mission-driven work you already do ties to CAC's funding criteria. Lastly, please make your goals SMARTY. Most of you have heard of SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, ambitious, realistic, and time-bound, but SMARTY goals are also inclusive, meaning they bring in traditionally marginalized or left out folks into the process, and equitable, meaning they seek to address systemic injustices. The concept of SMARTY goals comes from the Management Center, which has a worksheet and tips for how to write these that we can share. Again, when are the 2026 goals and all 2025 reporting requirements for all grantees due? The end of the day on January 31st. Next, we're going to be talking about funding restrictions and maintaining your eligibility. General operating support grants are for spending as your organization needs on general operating expenses. But there is a specific list of things that CAC funds cannot go towards, including programs outside the county, fundraising or benefits, regranting, travel outside the US, and others. Grantees must also maintain eligibility with CAC to receive their grant. This includes meeting all eligibility requirements listed in the guidelines, which include existing as a 501c3 organization based in Cuyahoga County, having an active board of at least 3 directors, timely reporting of financial requirements to the IRS and CAC, and others. The list shown here is not comprehensive, but comprehensive lists can be found in the GOS guidelines and in your grant agreement. Please be sure to review them carefully. So thanks for sticking with us through all of that. That was a lot of information. At the end of this slideshow, which we'll share via email, we have a list with all the links we've mentioned, but I also want to orient you toward finding the key materials on your own as you may need. The 2026-2027 General Operating Support Guidelines is where you'll find the list of eligibility requirements, funding restrictions, and reporting details. The actual report forms are found in our online application and reporting system, cacgrants.smaapply.org, and many handouts are linked in our CAC glossary. The glossary defines many terms we use throughout our work, including the terms we use in our funding criteria. All these things can be found on our website, which is cacgrants.org. And finally, if handouts and visuals aren't the best mode of learning exchange, your CAC grant managers are ready to help. We all answer our phones and reply to emails promptly, so please reach out if you have any questions. We're always here to help.